This is Battleground PA, a PennLive podcast discussing the issues that matter to Pennsylvanians and documenting the events in the Keystone State and beyond that could shape how you vote in the 2024 elections.
Well, greetings everyone again. This is Joyce Davis. I'm PennLive's outreach and opinion editor, and get your hankies out. This is the last Battleground PA. It's been quite a ride, hasn't it been, Jeffrey?
Yes, it has.
Yes,
But
yes.
just think, 2028 is almost here.
Oh, goodness. All right, here we go again. But look, to close out our Battleground PA, I thought it was fitting. We talked to the Democrats last week to ask them, hey guys, what happened? I mean, what's going on? And so I thought it would be good if we brought in two leaders in the Republican Party in Pennsylvania, in our area, to ask them to talk to them about where they see things going, how they saw the election, and where they see their party and their own leadership. Where do they see this going? So, Jeffrey, I think you may know the people we have with us here. It's Representative Bryan Cutler and Representative Jesse Topper. I want to welcome you both.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you.
What I'd like to do just to get us started is I said, let me turn it over to you for you to let our readers and our viewers know who you are, what you do, who you represent, and just that kind of thing to get us started. So Representative Cutler, would you like to start?
Sure. Bryan Cutler. I live in southern Lancaster County. It's about the bottom third of the county, geographically speaking. Everything south of Willow Street is the eastern part of the county. And I live in the Solanco School District. That's where I graduated high school from, and my own kids all have went. And this term, I was serving as the Republican leader, and I'm happy to hand those duties over to Representative, soon-to-be leader Topper for next session.
Right. And what I like about this seems to be a very pleasant, collegial, cordial handover. So, Representative Topper, tell us about yourself.
Not just cordial. Bryan looks ecstatic to be able to hand it over. So I haven't seen him look this relaxed in 10 years. But I do want to say before I kind of introduce myself how appreciative I am of Bryan and his work, his dedication to our caucus and his leadership role through honestly historic times. I mean, we think back to COVID and everything that happened during that year, and Representative Cutler was our leader at the helm. So thank him for his service and looking forward to his new chapter of service, because he's not going anywhere. We still have plenty of work for him to do, and I'll make sure he gets to do it. But my name is Jesse Topper. I represent the 78th District, which is Bedford and Fulton counties, all of those counties. And I happen to live in Bedford, Bedford Area School District, and in the borough of Bedford. So, we're excited to see how things go moving forward. This has been a district that has long been the number one Republican district in the House of Representatives in terms of percentage, voter registration and percentage. But obviously, we have our roles in Harrisburg that we're representatives in the Pennsylvania General Assembly. I joke all the time, my district might look like Alabama, but I don't serve in the Alabama General Assembly. So, we have to balance the needs of the district and also the needs of Pennsylvania as a whole.
Well, that sounds very wise. That sounds right. Jeffrey, we have battled it out over issues and all of that, but the one thing you and I both agree on, and I definitely do, we should really pay tribute to these folks who step up to serve in this kind of political climate. I mean, anyone who steps up to run for public office these days with so much out there, hats off to you, because it's a tough job. It's a tough thing to do. But Jeffrey, I'm going to let you ask the first question, and of our two distinguished leaders, we really want to hear from them where our Republican Party stands. But if you want to get us started, Jeffrey, go right ahead.
Sure. Well, first of all, let me start by saying, in terms of Representative Cutler, as a graduate of Franklin and Marshall, I am very pleased to see that there is somebody from Lancaster here. And secondly, for Representative Topper, as somebody who started out my career in Washington working for Congressman Bud Schuster, I have spent a fair amount of time in Bedford and Fulton counties. So
it's pretty good up here, Jeffrey, as you know.
It is good to see you both back. Well, I just like to start by seeing what you see as here we are in November, almost to December, and then on we go with the new year. I'd like to see what you think are your priorities and what are must-do accomplishments as we move into the first of the next couple of working years.
That's a good question. Do you guys agree on the priorities going forward? Why don't you start off, Representative Cutler?
Sure. In many ways, our priorities and our objectives as a caucus will be what they've continued to be for the last half dozen years or so. We're focused on ensuring that we as Pennsylvanians have the best opportunities. I've always categorized that as I want my own children as they get older, they're 21, 19, and 16, as they make life choices on where they live and where they choose to raise a family. I want them to pick Pennsylvania because it is the best state to live in, which obviously I believe. But I also want them to understand that it's the best in terms of opportunities going forward, not just for my own childhood. It's the best chance to get a good job. It's the best chance to get education. It's a great place to raise a family. And obviously Lancaster County and just like Bedford or all of those things, but we must compete on the national level. The number one export for many years has been our young degreed professionals. They come to great schools like Franklin and Marshall or Lebanon Valley or the state system where my own son goes at Millersville. And the truth is they choose to leave at some point. And we've got to make sure we've got a good tax environment. We've got to make sure we have public safety, and we've got to have opportunities for families. So that's kind of the global look, and how we do that at each and every time. Representative Topper kind of alluded to it earlier. We've had a lot of challenges over the last half dozen years or so, from COVID to the economy to the crash. And those challenges sometimes dictate the choices that you're given. But the truth is, we're always focused on making sure that this is just the best place to live and raise a family and have an opportunity to succeed.
Well, Representative Topper, I'm sure you disagree with everything he said. So let's hear what you got.
Look, I not only do I agree with it, so do the people of Pennsylvania. And the reason I say that is one of the things I noticed towards the end, I'm a political junkie. I think all of us on here are. I remember working the polls the first time for president, when President Bush and President Clinton faced off in I guess, was it 1990, whatever it might have been. Yeah, I was working a poll as a 12-year-old. In my dad's London fog, jacket, trying to hand out literature. And so I've been a political junkie. One of the things I noticed with campaigns is, what is the messaging leading up to election day? And when you hear, the Harris campaign and the Casey campaign having the same message as the McCormick campaign and the Trump campaign in regards to tax cuts, putting money back in people's pockets, making energy more affordable, groceries more affordable. Well, that's what we're about. That's what the message has been. It's what the message will continue to be. We need Pennsylvanians to have more money in their pockets. We've seen what inflation. It's a word that maybe people don't fully comprehend, but they know the effect of it, which is everything is more expensive, but they don't have more money to put towards it. So we need to make sure that folks are getting money that they have put into the system back. I think this is a time to start talking about real tax cuts in Pennsylvania. I think it's a time to start talking about real energy production in Pennsylvania, so that industry once again can take off and provide the jobs and the workforce and the natural resources that we need to bring the costs down. So I'm convinced that our priorities are the majority of Pennsylvanians' priorities moving forward.
Well, they're definitely, you kept telling me this, Jeffrey, people are focused on the pocketbook, right? That's what they want to hear. How are you going to make my life easier? All right. So let me ask you this, but we do want to help our readers understand. We have the past leader of the Republican Party in the legislature, right? And the future leader. So explain to us what happened. Why are you stepping away? You said I could call you Bryan, and how is it that you, Jesse, got to step into this hot seat? But start with Bryan. Why are you stepping out?
Well, Jesse kind of alluded to it at the beginning. I've certainly been blessed with being able to be in leadership for the last 10 years. And while I enjoyed the job, it is, as Jesse also pointed out, very stressful. And, we went through COVID. We went through the shutdowns, fighting with the governor. We went through the 2020 election. We went through the redistricting and some of the distortions that occurred in those maps. So it really is a lot of things to take in all at once. Ultimately, I chose to step down because it's the best thing for me and my family right now. Ironically, I'm the only one that didn't go back to school a couple months ago. Everybody, including my wife, is back in school. So I wish them all well. I'm very proud of them. And, that's something that I myself have done from time to time. And it really was just time to hand it off. And I'm confident that Jesse will do a wonderful job as leader. And we're going to make sure that he has everything that he needs to succeed. Because one of the things I think that we often don't do in politics very well is that kind of succession planning, Joyce. As you kind of, you alluded to, it's a very friendly handoff. And the truth is it was going to be regardless of who won the election. I actually had pulled the candidates aside and told them all, hey, whoever wins, let me know. And we're going to meet first thing 9 o'clock and we're going to start transferring stuff over the morning after the leadership elections. And I think it's what's best for the Commonwealth. And I think it's what's best for our caucus at this time. I appreciated Representative Topper's kind words. He really is a great gentleman. He's been a great friend as I've kind of went through all of my own challenges and leadership issues that we've encountered. Everything from issues with members. We had a very close friend of ours pass away right before swearing in day a couple terms ago. And, Jesse's always been there for me. He's been a wonderful friend and I'm excited to see him in this new role and glad that he, wanted, despite seeing all of those challenges, was still willing to put his name forward and willing to do it because I think that it's going to be what's best for the Commonwealth going forward.
Right. And Jeffrey, he raised some issues there that we really need to hit on hard, and that these people have families, they're doing all of this stuff. They have a life, and sometimes that all of this, all this stress, everything can interfere with that. Enough is enough sometimes, right? You're still going to be a good servant to the people, but you don't necessarily have to be right in the middle of it all. So Representative Topper.
Oh, yeah. You're right, Joyce. These are I call them high impact positions. Gone are the days of, you mentioned Congressman Bud Schuster. Those days are gone. Staying in 30, 40 years, being in leadership for 20 years, those days of the Matt Ryans and some of the kind of legacy members of the PA General Assembly, those days are over. Social media, the impact of what we see with throughout the state on both sides. It's just a different climate now. But what I know is for the next 2 years, I believe that I have the energy and I think my skill set fits this particular position in terms of why I decided to run. We need to raise, the morale of our caucus. As Bryan said, it's been a difficult couple of years. We've all had challenges. And then at the end of the day, we look back and we understand we're in a very narrow minority. It's a tough place to be. And yet we still have to find ways to govern and make sure that our members understand that they have an impact that they can make in their communities and on Pennsylvania as a whole. And I believe that we'll be able to do that. It won't be easy. It never is. As my dad always used to say, nothing worthwhile in life comes easy. But I think we have the team in place. And with the support of great members like Bryan and so many others, I believe we'll be able to make it happen.
Very
Joyce.
Good. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah. I not that there's anything much that I think you can do about it, but I certainly would like to hear your views on what's going on in this U.S. Senate race that just seems never to end, and one complication after another, and any thoughts you might have on it.
Well, here's what we know, Jeffrey, is that they're not counting ballots that shouldn't be counted anymore. I mean, the Supreme Court has spoken. The governor has also spoken in support of the Supreme Court's decision. We just found out, maybe Bryan has the exact time, but I know it was a little while ago that the commissioner said those ballots that were wrong, that had errors on them, that were not verified, will not be counted. And that is the law. There's a reason we have signature requirements, both for in-person and for mail-in balloting. There's a reason why there are guardrails on these things. It's not to make it more complicated, it's to make it more secure. And at the end of the day, we simply cannot disregard election law based on what we feel at the time and the moment, or if we're upset about the results. This is both sides. sides, right? We have to be conscious of that. And what we're seeing, I think what we saw from our perspective was a blatant disregard by some local commissioners about how these ballots should be counted. And the court has spoken, they have ceased, and we should be back on track.
Yeah, and you're right. The courts have spoken. It's over now. I mean, they just have to continue counting what is clearly verifiable, right? And then giving us the final say. Although one of the things that was brought to my attention was that apparently Dave McCormick before thought it was okay to do that. Can you guys explain why that position may have changed, or did it change? Maybe that's wrong.
Yeah, I don't really think that it did change. When you look at what happened in the primary race, and honestly, I think it's a good example for where we're at now. You go back to the primary race two years ago, Dave McCormick only lost that race by 900 and some votes. And, he conceded and stopped the recount to save the taxpayers that money. Many folks are surprised to learn that when it's under 0.5%, which we currently are at like 0.48 or so, that it triggers automatic recount. And that's borne by us, the taxpayers. And this is 30 some thousand votes. So, the truth is we don't need to have a recount. It could all stop if Senator Casey did the honorable thing and simply said enough is enough. But unlike myself, who was willing to step away from power, I don't believe that we're seeing that demonstrated by the current senator. And it's unfortunate because I think that that's what's best for the Commonwealth. The election results are fairly clear. And when you look at the challenges, and Representative Topper pointed this out, you don't get to simply change the rules because you didn't like the outcome. The reason that people have faith in our elections, and one of the reasons that the 2020 election was so problematic, was because those rules changed as we went forward because of the nature of the COVID pandemic. We had states who had never had mail-in ballots before have to implement it as, a safety protocol. We actually had it. We had a process in place. And, so you can't suddenly change the rules and say these other votes should count because that's, that's who I want to win. That's not how elections are run. You set the rules. It's very clear. The courts ruled this way 3 times. You count the votes according to that. And if you don't like it, you don't run to the courts to get the change you want. What you do is you work the legislative process. We did that 2 years ago under Governor Wolf. He didn't like the ultimate solution that allowed for pre-canvassing, which would get us results sooner, allowed for ballot curing, which would have fixed all these mistakes, but also did include a voter ID component. And it was a voter ID component it went the whole way down from anything photo issued down to utility bills, and included essentially a self-ratifying affidavit. All you had to do was sign a form that I am Bryan Cutler. And Governor Wolf chose to veto it. That was his prerogative as governor. And so until the legislative process works its way out, that is the law.
That is the law. And well, we're going forward, but I'll tell you the one thing that has changed, and you brought it up, things are different now, especially with mail-in ballots. And I know Jeffrey and I were at it back and forth on whether I love mail-in voting, but it seems like the Republican Party, that actually ended up benefiting you this election, right? Because most of your voters actually, or many of them actually did vote early by mail, right?
Yes. Bryan brought up a really good point. One of the issues with mail-in voting when we first instituted was the pandemic. I contend, had COVID not happened, that rollout would have been far different. We wouldn't have had the amount of people voting by mail for the first time, which overwhelmed our courthouses that had never done it before. But there was at least a process in place. Again, when the Secretary of State started issuing, how to deal with cured ballots differently than what the law said, and I had, Bedford County was treating them different than Fulton County. Bedford and Fulton County are both red counties. It's not like they were treating them differently to try and get a result. They just didn't know what the heck to do. And that created a lot of chaos. This time, you didn't have that. You had a system in place. I'll use my own parents as an example, 80 and 73 years old, who back in 2020 said they didn't trust it. This year they did it, and Dad said it was the greatest thing he ever did. He thought it was amazing. So sometimes it takes education. It takes the ability to trust the process. And again, as Bryan said, we have to remember that as soon as we rolled that out, COVID hit. Right. Had that not happened and the rollout would have been better, I think some of the chaos would have been avoided, and you would have seen a trust in the system a lot earlier.
Very good. Very good. Jeffrey, you wanted to say something? I'm sorry. Didn't want to cut you
No,
off.
no. I think that's about right. And we have a separation of about 100 years between pandemics, so I think we're all off the hook for the next round.
Well, I don't know. Be careful. Be careful what you say. Do not wish that on us. So, well, as we look forward, that clearly, let me just share, our hearts here, because many of the voters really are tired of meanness, right? They want you guys and the Democrats to work together, to be nice, to get things done. Talk about that. Where do you see things going with being able to actually have a bipartisan handshake with people? Just share what your thoughts are.
Well, I'll go first.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I can share a little bit of my own experience. There are times where it has occurred. If you look around my office and, particularly up in Harrisburg, most of my bills have a Democrat as number 2 prime sponsor on them, because I always thought it was best to work through the problems long before the bill ever made it out of committee. And that approach worked for a long time. One of the challenges, though, with the new maps, the way that they are drawn, is you've got 90 or 95 people in both caucuses that only ever have to worry about a primary. And by virtue of those seats being safe, that naturally pulls everybody out to the right and to the left. And, I recognize that the chairs, of the redistricting commission, his stated goal was to get a numerically close chamber. The challenge that it presents is it's not one that is apt to compromise, because of the fact that it drives everybody to win a primary. And whereas some of the older maps, when you had 40 or 50 seats at any election cycle that could change hands, that drove people to compromise, because there would be an alternative that would be more likely to be contrasted against in a general election. This map, as drawn, there's only 12 or 15 seats that will decide who controls the House each and every cycle.
Wow.
That is a recipe for gridlock. And, I was very proud of the fact that for many years we avoided that kind of Washington, D.C. gridlock here in the Commonwealth by virtue of having a larger number of competitive districts. With the last redraw, that unfortunately is very challenging. Now, part of being a leader, though, is also recognizing that you have to put different people into different spots sometimes. And that was one of the reasons why I left. You opened with that question. And, I had my shot to work with the other side and to work the campaign side of the street and to get the majority back. We didn't succeed. In fact, I would love to go back in history, though, and find out when was the last time that any single seat didn't change hands from the party that controlled it going into the election. I'm not aware of any, because lots of times they'll switch a seat. We might flip 2 and they flip 2 and things, the numbers might not change. But the idea that this map is drawn in such a way that the individual's party who controlled that seat at the start of the election cycle resulted in the same outcome on the other side of the election cycle, for me, is really hard to believe. So only time will tell how that bears out. But part of being leader is recognizing, okay, sometimes we got to change, the chairs, and we got to make other choices based on that. And that's why I ultimately thought it was good to put somebody else in the room and see if, Representative Topper can be more successful than me. And I certainly hope that he is.
I think that people expect and even desire a certain amount of partisanship in terms of debate. We should have great debates about tough ideas, right? We should have great debates about challenges that face our state and our nation. And I think people have a comfort level in the fact that there is divided government in terms of, 2 different sides, sometimes 3 or 4 different sides being presented. I think what the problem is lately is the tone that has trickled down to not just those of us in the arena, but when you have people saying they're not going to Thanksgiving because part of their family voted for other people, like that's, Jeffrey, you've been, you've seen a couple of contentious elections on our side over the years. Or like that never. I went to my uncle's house in New Jersey, knowing they were all, liberal Democrats from the old school, and it was never an idea that even though we had our disagreements and sometimes fierce disagreements, that it would get to the point that we would, lose friends and disown family members. And so I think that's the part that people are tired of. But I've always said government reflects the culture, it reflects the people. If you're tired of it, change it. If you're tired of it at the government level, well, then take it out of your office, take it out of your Thanksgiving dinner, take it out of your, you're gonna unfriend people on social media because they disagree with you. If you want to see a change at the government level, pick your own little world and say, I'm not going to participate in this tone. And I think that's when you'll start to see real change in terms of what people want to see.
Well,
one of the things that I think exacerbates all of this, which is relatively new for all of us, is the presence of social media. Bad enough that you had television popping out these anti so-and-so commercials all of the time. That's been going on for most of our lives here. I remember the famous LBJ commercial about Barry Goldwater. It was called the Daisy commercial.
Daisy.
And there was a little girl sitting in the field pulling the petals off of a daisy, and she's counting, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, and then you hear a guy's voice, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then a nuclear explosion ensues, and you hear Lyndon Johnson's voice. These are the stakes in this election. Well, that was notably pretty bad, but I think now we're about 100 times worse.
We are.
Because everybody can do this on social media, one tap of Twitter and, you can set the world on fire, and that is a problem.
But that brings up another issue, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. I mean, I guess the question that I am left with, is have we been duped by foreign people trying to divide Americans? Have we been subjected to a real campaign from China or I don't know who to make us hate each other? You know what I mean? Because it may not just be it could be from outside play. I mean, I don't know. What am I wrong about that? I'm happy to hear if you think differently. What do you think, Representative Cutler?
Well, for myself, and I agree with Jeffrey on this point, social media has really changed how we interact. And we started seeing it back before COVID. And, I'll use personal example. One of my favorite things to do is when somebody emails me in the office, if I know who they are, I call them because it's too easy to, kind of project emotions into an email that may or may not be there because they're just words. And oftentimes people will type things out that they would never say themselves in person. And you see that all the time in social media. And then social media actually adds another layer because you have the option of being anonymous. You could be the Patriot Warrior or as your handle or the liberal defender, and then you could put out talking points, whatever you want. But the truth is it's not personal. And then that started as we headed into the COVID shutdown. And then honestly, we as a society were isolated for months at a time. I saw the impacts on my own kids. I saw, what it meant to them, and it's interesting, there's a whole generation of students that in their mind, and I saw it with two of my kids, 21-year-old and the 19-year-old, both voted this time. And I saw it in them and their friends in terms of their political engagement. They viewed the COVID shutdown as an overreaching government took my friends, took my family, took my sports, took my, ability to go to prom or have homecoming or whatever it was. So that will absolutely impact how they view the utility of government going forward well into their adult lives. Just as Jeffrey outlined the commercial he remembers, I remember Reagan's Morning in America. And that was really casting a better vision. Are we better today than we were 4 years ago? And I think in a lot of ways, social media, the answer is no, because it's easier to be mean to somebody that you don't view as a person. And, and that presents some unique challenges. Now, with that said, I was always very cognizant of, and at the freshman level, every incoming group of individuals is called freshmen. When I came in and when Jesse came in, we did bipartisan orientation. So some of my very best friends were Democrats that were in my class. In fact, when I was sworn in as speaker, the judge who swore me in both times was a Democrat that I sat next to on the floor. And, so we got to know the other side as people. And it's much harder to be mean to somebody when you know their wife, you know their kids, you know their husband, you know their story, you know why they ran for office. And we had 3 classes of incoming folks who just never had those relationships with their classmates.
What a shame. What
And
a
you,
shame.
and you couple that with really high turnover. More than 50% of our caucus has served less than 6 years. So that's 3 terms. So there's not that institutional history or trajectory there anymore. So it's going to take conscious effort. That's one of the things I hope to do, not being in a formal leadership spot, but making sure that the freshmen get to know senior members and we cross party lines and we understand how it works, because ultimately that'll make Jesse's job easier as leader. Because that's how you can get things done. Because we know that it's possible. In 19 and 20, when I was leader, we passed a record number of bills. We had a record number signed into law. But at the same time, we had a record number of vetoes. So I could disagree with the governor without it ever being personal. And that seems to have kind of been put by the wayside here the last couple of years. And that's unfortunate because, I often put it as we all agree on what the issue is. Where we disagree is on how best to solve it.
Exactly. Representative Topper, do you want to add anything to that? And are you in agreement that maybe, or can you use his help in making sure that things stay cordial?
Absolutely. Look, I mean, again, there's going to be tense moments. I mean, we got to keep in mind in the history of this nation, we fought a civil war at one time. There have been moments of violence. There have been moments of intense disagreements. The 1960s brought forth all kinds of change and controversy and dramatic cultural reshuffling, if you will. Some of that we have that feeling of it's worse now than it's ever been, and maybe it is. I don't know. I was born in 1981. I feel like maybe I missed a few things. Even Representative Cutler might look younger than me, but he's clearly not. But I think that we have to remember there have been times before where we have been divided as a nation and we have figured out ways to move forward. I think we will again, but I do agree with Jeffrey that the advent of social media does change the game. And will absolutely rely on Bryan and other, I'll call them veteran members who have served through multiple governors and multiple leadership changes and multiple majorities and minorities, really have them lean on them, so that, because institutional knowledge is an important thing. And I think they will be very helpful in the upcoming session.
Joyce,
absolutely. Jeffrey, you have a final word here.
A final word. One thing I would add, as you know, I worked for President Reagan in the long ago as a White House political director, and his famous nemesis of the day.
But go ahead.
His famous nemesis of the day was the Democrat House Speaker Tip O'Neill. And when Reagan took office and had one of his first meetings with Speaker O'Neill, who was every bit the partisan, Reagan said to him, well, Mr. Speaker, well, Tip, we can disagree until 6 o'clock. And Tip O'Neill said, why 6 o'clock? And Reagan said, well, after that, we're just a couple of Irishmen who can get together for a beer.
There you go.
And talk things out. And I always thought that was a wise governing philosophy.
Well, very good. Well, listen, I want to thank both of them and wish Representative Topper well in his new position, and really say thank you on behalf of the state to Representative Cutler as well for his fine work and for the attitude that he's bringing to where he sees his power lying in the future, which is really wonderful. And Jeffrey, hats off and salute to you, my friend, for joining me over these months as things got so tough, right? And with ups and downs of the political campaign, but we always kept it civil. We always had a handshake. We always had shared a laugh together. So.
Exactly. So now it's on the Battleground 2028.
Yes. Well, okay. We'll see how that goes. But again, thank you, everyone. And to our dear readers and viewers, we thank you so much for joining us here in Battleground PA. Remember, we'll still be doing these editorial board meetings, so I may still have Representative Cutler and Representative Topper meet the editorial board. So get ready. We will still keep you engaged in what's going on in Pennsylvania and beyond. Farewell, my friend Jeffrey. We'll have you back. You're on the editorial board anyway. But thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye. Thanks, Joyce.
Bye-bye.